Okay, cool. So let me try pick up the stream on the other side before we get started. I was just giving you a heads up that indeed, but we are still behind the scenes, still trying to.
I'm trying to close
I have to find
the
you.
window. Let me see
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
I hear the crows.
you're hearing them. That's me.
I hear the crows.
It looks black when I am looking at myself here online,
That's it.
which means we might have a network problem.
I wonder if it's me
Yeah.
who has bad internet, no?
And if that is Jesus, this is Rain Network, by the way. So don't support Rain. I'm getting a delay in.
And it did that with my pillow also.
All right. So may I ask for permission that I am in the background in tonight's conversation because of this network problem at Rain. So I don't promote Rain that anybody goes for Rain because it's a mess.
What is rain?
So
The service provider.
it's the network
Yeah.
provider.
Mm.
So I don't know if they saw that I was with Dr. Kanye and then it got crazy.
I'm on Telcom, so
Hello, Mama.
Sanibonani.
Hi, Sis
Ninjani.
Khethi. Hi,
Hello.
hi.
Hello, beautiful ladies. Oh, Kamafu.
Nawe. Thokoza.
Thokozani.
Now it means you as well.
Yes.
That's the
Nawe.
same thing in Kubuntu.
Is it?
Exactly same thing.
Wow.
We're having a bit of a technical problem with my audio delay, and that's why we're complaining about Rain Network. So I was asking for permission. At least my screen is on, but I see it's hanging. I was asking that you ladies take charge of the conversation. Obviously, our mom, Dr. Big Sister Kanyisile Litchfield Tshabalala, is our matriarch. So obviously, as per Isintu, we have to put her in her place where she belongs. So I'm going to ask her to maybe start tonight's discussion. And may I ask everybody to introduce themselves and what they do so that I'm not this crazy host who is trying to take up space. But yes, there's a technical problem, but I am here. And thank you so much. And can I hand over to you, Dr. Mother Kanyisile?
Thank you, Ntsigi, and thank you for convening us on this platform. Thank you, my sister Nduku, tuning in all the way from the US. You must be tired in your spirit to be locked up in that belly of the beast. But what can we do? They take up our spaces, so we can't shun their spaces too. We need to invade their spaces also. Khethi Ntshangase, Ntshangase, Nduku, she has such a beautiful name. Khethi Ntshangase is I choose to be grateful. It's a choice. It's such a beautiful name. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I am Dr. Kanyisile Litchfield Tshabalala, and honestly, I just use doctor so that in South African Nduku we call them clever blacks, so that clever blacks don't question what I say. But otherwise, I can safely tell everybody that 99.9% of the knowledge I know about African spirituality, pre-colonial history, pre-colonial African culture, colonialism itself, actually, and the current state in which we are called neo-colonialism. I didn't really learn that at school or through my doctorate. It's knowledge I had to find on the side. So yes, welcome everybody. Thank you, Ntiki, for convening us. I think I will give it first to my sister Khethi Ntshangase to introduce herself, and then Nduku from her just take over.
Thank you so much. What an honor to convene with such powerhouses of women. I have been following steadily. Nzigi and I go back a long time. It's close to 20 years now as students in our youth, but also in the art spaces. I find myself as a social activist that uses music as a tool of communication. And most recently, I had studied photography, but I'm using it more now. So it's audio visuals that speak to highlight what is good about Africa, but also to try and remove the gag that we found ourselves experiencing for a couple of years. I was talking to Flo, actually one of the poets that we know very well, and he made a highlight of something that is very true for all of us in our age group, as artists who want to, who have a voice, who have an opinion, who are traveled, who can see, who make comparisons, who can see the injustices. However, the assassination of Chris Hani back in '93, in fact, gagged us, as did the assassination of Steve Biko back in the '70s, gagged that generation. Just to, it's put fear in us as we are growing. We now have, we have children, we have families that we are scared of upsetting or rocking the boat with all that we see, but we really see a lot, and so it's very encouraging when we listen to your voice and the bravery and the conviction in your heart. I'm aligned with your mentality and your reasoning and your Pan-African strength, absolutely, and so it gives us courage to nonetheless find our voices and let it be heard. We're still trying. But yes, social activist at heart, traveled a bit on the continent, very passionate, very, we see the discrepancies, the indoctrination of what Africa is when you don't leave South Africa is so different, in fact, to when you do step out. And it's eye-opening, and my first trip alone as a young adult in my 20s to Botswana, I came back, I was like, everybody get your passports, get out of here. You've got to get out, you've got to go and see, you've got to be enlightened. And there's a reason for xenophobia. In fact, it is to divide, to keep us separated instead of engaging and asking as many questions as possible from people who have already had their independence for so many decades. There's so much for us to learn, but we get pigeonholed into this idea of xenophobia. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much. I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
The name is Nduku, and I'm thinking now as I sit with Mama Kanyisile, and I'm forgetting my sister's name. Mama Kanyisile, if you could remind me, because the names are not showing anymore.
Ketubonga.
Ketubonga. Yes, my sister Ketubonga. Thank you, Ntiki. As I sit with them, I'm thinking, what best way to introduce myself? And the one way I can introduce myself that is inclusive of everything that I am is I am an African warrior woman, joined by my fellow African warrior women, because in that is a mother, in that is a defender, in that is a farmer, in that is a cook, in that is everything that you need to be to nurture your community and ensure the well-being of your community. So today and yesterday and for days to come, I am an African warrior woman.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I guess
Mama,
the
so do
audience.
you want to start the session for us?
Yes, I was just gonna say, I guess the audience is just like, okay, guys, what are you talking about tonight? Get to the point, get to the point. Sorry, audience, we have to introduce ourselves. I just recently came back from Ethiopia. I actually came back last week, Saturday. And while I have frequented Bole so much, but I've always used Bole as a junction to go somewhere else. So I never really entered Bole except once. I think 10 to 15 years ago, I was still in the Navy. So that was very sanitized because you get off the plane and they're waiting for you. The defense attaché is there, you're whisked, you don't see what ordinary people go through. And I must say, I'm appalled. And I said to Ntshiki, I am not the one to develop hatred for a people. So before this festers and becomes a cancer inside of me, I want to take it out so that I don't end up hating all Ethiopians. It was a nasty experience. It was atrocious. I don't have words to describe it. Right from the airport. It shocked me to discover that despite Ethiopia being the headquarters of the African Union, all African countries except Djibouti, which was part of Ethiopia and they seceded, and Kenya, all 52 African countries require a visa to enter Ethiopia. It's $50 per person. I looked at this and I asked myself, how much has Ethiopia made out of the headquarters of the AU being in that country? Are they Pan-African or is this a business for them? It's the first question that hit me. The second question that hit me was the treatment. We are all AU members. It's supposed to count for something. Our countries are AU member states. We were in the same queue with Japanese, Europeans, Chinese, whoever. It was a first come, first serve. So if there's 30 Europeans in front of you, they'll serve the 30 Europeans first to enter the seat of the African Union. Again, I looked at this and I had to ask myself, what is really Pan-African about Ethiopians? Third thing that appalled me, the process to enter the AU itself. I mean, I don't even want to go there. Number 4, on the wall of that African Union, African women who have tuned in, there is not a single photo of a woman. It's an all-male wall. Therefore, I'm not shocked that since Ghana 1957, we've only produced 3 African presidents. By the way, all of them by default, not systemic. Somebody died, Joyce Banda popped in. Magufuli was killed. The lady that's in the president now took over. In Liberia, people say, oh, but that was an election. No, they had fought such a bitter and evil civil war where they would shoot AKs through the vagina of females, where young boys of 14 and 15 were eating human liver to strengthen themselves. It was such a mess that the men had made there. They needed a woman to come and salvage and clean their mess. So they got Johnson, and she really tried to clean up that mess. So it's safe for me to say, in 57 years since Ghana got the so-called independence, and we ushered into this era where the AU is supposed to be in charge, we've never produced the female president. Because as I say, these 3 were all by default. So I was appalled. I thought, I need to come and talk to Ntshiki. Last thing before I give it over to the warrior women who have tuned in with me, and thank you for really coming to stand on my side, is that I was shocked again to realize that Addis Ababa as a town was founded, please listen to me, founded and named by Empress Taitu Betul, a woman. There's not even a statue of her at that AU precinct. Such an insult. So this patriarchy, this seeping, violent, misogynistic patriarchy that African men have internalized is playing out at the AU. So I'm both angry with the AU as I'm angry with the Ethiopian government that's making money out of that headquarters being there. Lastly, I'll just say this and give it over. Imagine NATO members requiring a visa to enter Belgium, where the HQ of NATO is. I mean, it's absurd. It will never happen. It will never happen. So Africans, we are so confused and so un-African, all of us, that even the things we do defy logic. So I think I'll leave it there and just allow my sisters to internalize this. Oh, lastly, so you get really angry. Our flight landed at 3 in the afternoon. Khethi Nduku. 3 in the afternoon. There was a woman sitting on a wheelchair, African woman, who had arrived there at 2 in the morning. We found part of the people who, remember, we are going to an AU meeting. We found part of the civil society, even if we are civil society, but it was an AU meeting. We found part of the crew that was going to the same meeting with us, who had arrived same time with her at 2 a.m. This was 3 in the afternoon. They were telling them, we don't want to see the invitation on your phones, print it. Where do you print in front of an immigration officer as a foreigner in the country? You just got off your plane. You are with immigration. Where do you print? They are so nasty, so unfriendly, so un-African. Somebody needs to call them out. I think I'll leave it there.
Oh, that all of this is appalling. All of it. And definitely who's dropping the ball and where are we dropping it? And how do we, oh la la. Okay, so two things. So there's clearly the misrepresentation or the non-representation of women in the AU spaces, and then there's Ethiopia's issues with the continent, that it has decided to make it a money-making machine. I had one experience, as you say, we pass through Ethiopia. We don't, a lot of us so I never say I've been to Ethiopia because I had a stopover, and I remember that my flight had been delayed I was late for my flight. My plan had been to arrive at OR and change my rands into euros because I was on my way to Paris. And I didn't get a chance to, but in my mind, I thought, okay, well, there's a stopover in Ethiopia. I ought to be able to do something because it's still on the continent. I arrived with my rands trying to buy some euros, and they looked at me with such attitude. They were just like, what is this? And they just pointed at the board like, those are the only currencies. If you've got yen, if you've got dollar, you've got euros, that's all really that, and pounds. That's all they are ready to talk to you with. So they didn't even like, what is this? That was the question. I'm South African. This is a South African rand. Can I just buy? I need to just exchange. And that was the attitude, and that left a sour taste in my mouth. But to discover that even the Africans, despite the fact that African Union is based on the so every time, does this mean every time there's a gathering, the Africans who gather all have to be paying $50 for their visas?
I want to believe, as long as we are not a president of a country, or as long as we are not going through diplomatic, I think. Because we were on the same plane with Umam Nkosazana Zuma. We all left, and she was sitting business class first seat, so she could have gotten off first. But we all got off and left her there because I suppose protocol came and whisked her off. So, which is a problem, because it means our leaders don't really go through what we go through in Ethiopia airport.
No.
So they have no clue. But it's actually not true, because when I complained, the people I was with, because we were from over 20 different African countries, they said, oh, welcome to Ethiopia. People have been calling this out for so long. Ethiopians don't care. Excuse my French. They don't give a shit. They don't care. They have the attitude of, so what are you going to do about it? Because they know our leaders don't care.
Solutions. What would be the solutions? How do you just like airlift the African Union building and go put it somewhere else? These are dangerous scenarios. I don't know. Nduku, do you get any ideas creeping in your head? I mean, my blood is boiling. So this is a bit frustrating, most definitely.
Yes. So buildings are just that, buildings. They can be taken down and we can build elsewhere. We associate too much emotion and spiritual investment on things that are very earthly, like buildings. So yes, we can move it if we want to. Yes, we can move it if Ethiopia is not treating Africans as Africans. Yes, we can. The one thing that you said, Mama Kanyisile, that Africans are paying $50 to go through Ethiopia. And I'm thinking it's the same price they're charging the Chinese. It's the same price they're charging the whites. And the Chinese and the whites are earning much more than the Africans. Like before we even say Africans should not pay at all, let's just think about that. Africans who earn way less when you compare the income ratios of both of the foreigners and us, way less. So I don't understand why any nation that is supposed to be standing for Africa is charging the same amount you're charging foreigners to get through. And then I have been to other airports, and especially in the West, where you clearly see a citizens line, and that one moves faster. So if you're going to those places and being treated that way, and the whole thing with the visa and immigration, it is very frustrating that we are very lenient to these foreigners who are not lenient to us when we go to their homelands. Yeah. That's an issue in itself. But as we talk about Africa, and immediately Mama Kanyisile said this to me, I said, there should be no visa for any Africans anywhere. And I'm including the Africans within the United States, the descendants of our brothers and sisters who were kidnapped and enslaved within the United States, in the Caribbean, everywhere Black people, Africans, Wana Ubuntu are. Once you get to the motherland, that is the motherland. And therefore, you don't need to show, but your appearance, you don't need to show that you belong on the motherland, because we can see you belong on the motherland. You don't need to pay a visa to come home. So the whole idea of visa for our people in our own land is just ridiculous, outrightly. And then there's and I was looking up to remember why Ethiopia was chosen as the AU's headquarters. And now I'm remembering Emperor Haile Selassie and all that I'm learning about him, the fact that he prayed to a white Jesus, and people followed him thinking he was African, but he's praying to a white Jesus, just everything, uncovering and digging up the truth from under all this mess. And I can understand why our sister is very overwhelmed by it all, because it is overwhelming. And the first time you're hit by the truth after believing for so many years the lie, it is truly unsettling. And it takes a minute, and some of us are better than others at handling it. And I'm grateful that I have been strong in handling the truth as it comes and as I get rid of the lies. Here's the thing. I said to Mama Kanyisile, Congo should be the headquarters. No question, no arguing. Congo should be the headquarters. I say Congo because it is the central part. And if we're talking about energy and we think about how energy moves, Congo is the central part of our motherland. And not only because it's the central part, because if Congo is not liberated, we are not liberated. And therefore, if we have our interest in putting the headquarters there, we're going to ensure her liberation. We're going to ensure her well-being. And therefore, by default, when she is well, we will all be well. I have heard, I haven't yet witnessed an Ethiopian who said to me this, but I have heard that Ethiopians do not identify as Africans. And therefore, my question is, why would you put a headquarters in a place where people don't identify as Africans?
Here's my thing. Why would you put an African headquarters in a country that is either Christian or Muslim? That's what they fight for. There's no African spirituality in Ethiopia. They are proud to tell you that Christianity wasn't brought by colonizers there. And I'm just like, but it is in the book of Acts. I think it's chapter 16, if I'm not wrong, where an Ethiopian eunuch converted to Christianity. So they are converts. Whether it came with whites or it did not, they are still converts. It is not from the soil of Ethiopia. Before that eunuch converted, they were in African spirituality, which they've totally forgot, which they will not even identify with. They'll actually stone you if you're going to tell them about African spirituality. So for me, who is in African spirituality, Ntsigi and Khethi and Nduku, my sisters, I believe in spirits that surround something. That AU building is surrounded by ruthless patriarchy and misogyny. It's also surrounded by a very non-African spirit. Now, I'm not shocked why we haven't moved an inch, but I'm also not shocked why we make decisions that don't make sense. The same AU has pronounced over the African Free Trade Agreement or African Free Trade Area. Now, my first question is, we all don't own our means of production, that is our natural resources. So what are we going to be trading in, was my first question. 2, the people who are hustling what is called local produce or local items is what we call the informal sector, a very insulting name too, but let's call it that for now because that's what they call it. The informal sector, women in the crafts, women in the market. Now, picture an African Zulu woman or Xhosa trying to bring these, and the Zulu head you see there on my picture, trying to go and open a stall in Ethiopia. They must contend with $50 with the treatment at the airport. I doubt they will even enter with those items. Picture one from Morocco or wherever. Even with the visas we are talking about amongst ourselves, Nduku, how are we going to free trade amongst ourselves if we still maintain visas amongst each other? Because it's not just Ethiopia that we must call out. It's just that Ethiopia is more appalling because they house the AU. But we also have visas amongst ourselves. But we talk big words in the AU about African Free Trade Agreement, Africa Agenda 2064, where we are lifting the whole of Africa together. Lifting what? If we can't even enter each other's territories without being screened like a criminal. How? Something absurd happened to me, and my sister Ntsigi knows it, and Nduku. I was denied entry into DRC for visa on arrival. We were 5 on the letter. 2 Kenyans, 1 Central African Republic, 1 Zambian, myself. They told me in my face, we are denying it to you because you are a South African. And then they had a nerve to steal my luggage. I never got it back. That's Kinshasa Airport. The same Congo we are fighting for, by the way. That
When
time,
was
that was last year. That time, the SANDF is deployed
military.
in Kenya. My tax is spent protecting Congolese DRC who think I'm nothing but a piece of shit.
That's because they don't agree with the presence of the South African soldiers on the Congo.
I'm not even sure. I don't think it's because they don't agree, because the M23 is ravaging Eastern DRC, and we are not the only ones deployed there. Tanzanians too, and whoever. It's an AU peacekeeping force. I don't think it's that. It's just the madness that we are as Africans. That's why I said the way we are mad Africans, even the things we do don't add up, because we refuse to embrace who we are. If you are first Muslim before you're African, first Christian.
So I've got a question.
Yes, Ntsigi.
I've got a question. So, you know, I hear us speaking about breaking down the borders and everything. And this is a huge issue in South Africa at the moment that's causing a lot of problems, this kind of narrative, because it makes people feel as if we are talking about people who are not registered. And the thing is that in South Africa, we do have a world-renowned, known porous border issue. And now we don't have control over the country and over crime in the country because of this open borders policy that we're talking about. So how do we control this movement between ourselves in a way that still, where we can still, you know, all be having some kind of accountability number, so that you are still paying taxes, you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I welcome Phaphano Phasha. I'm going to add her to the studio. She'll introduce herself. But I don't know if you want to respond to that quickly.
I'll take a minute, then I'll hand it over to my 2 sisters. Look, Ntsigi, you never throw away the water, the bucket, and the baby. The issue of porous borders in South Africa is not the the non-South African Africans are not to blame for that. Our own defense and policing systems are at fault. In the whole of the EU, you don't need a visa to travel within the EU. Why has it not led to criminal activities? Why has it not led to undocumented migrants in an explosion? So for me, it's not an indictment on the Africans that come here. It's an indictment on the failure of our own. It's a governance system. We have failed to govern. The ANC has failed us in ways that I cannot even describe on this podcast. That's one. Two, we were not talking about borders yet here. We are talking about the visa. We are saying, you are Kenya, you are South Africa, you are Mozambique for now. That's what you are. So, and you have a system that says, I have a Kenyan ID, I have a South African ID. The first thing we can do for ourselves is to nullify the visa requirement as an entry into each other's countries. We start there. The borders we can discuss, because the issue of making borders fall for South Africa, but everybody else keep their borders, is also not Pan-African. I mean, I'll leave it there. If these borders must fall, they must fall in 54 countries. But you can't expect South African borders to fall, but everybody else keep their borders. So that's why for me, I didn't want to discuss the borders for today. Can we just stick with the visa? Where for me to enter the DRC, it's over 200 US dollars, around 215, something like that. I mean, how are we even going to build the African free trade area that we are talking about if visa blocks people from traveling within each other's countries? But also, before I give it to my two sisters, here's the thing. It intrigued me when I found this. Welcome, my sister Phaphano. It intrigued me when I found this because it is said officially there are 194 countries in the world. Now here it comes. Hold on to your chairs. America is visa-free to 188 countries. They only require visa to 7 countries, and I'm sure North Korea, Iran is one of those countries. Now, I say, who runs the world? America. So the American passport is a visa-free passport. But all of our passports require visas to go somewhere, including within Africa. Guys, no, I refuse. I think I'll leave it there and give it to my two sisters. Nsike, I hope it answered you.
I'm trying to honor protocol and let my elders come before me, so I'll do that. Nsiki, we can't hear you.
I think Sisi, come in.
Am I audible now?
Yes, we are audible now.
Yes, I was gonna say Khethi and then Nduku can finish up so that at least Phaphano can get a sense of what the conversation is, and then we hand over to her to introduce herself and then put in her word on the topic tonight. Thank you, Nduku.
Khethi Ntshangase, please come in. Nduku said she wants to come in after you to observe protocol.
Now we must we must make a comparison of birth dates now. I don't know about this protocol and elders.
Anyway. In Africa, you don't become an elder because of age only. Okay.
Yeah, both. I think in terms of the controlling of access to the country and the movement of people, the understanding with the AU, with the EU, is that if you are French and you are doing crime in Spain, the system is one that they can trace you where you come from. The problem here in South Africa is that the Nigerian does something wrong, Opry Street, we don't know who his people are. We can't, and the relationships between the countries is not so that there's trust issues. There's a competition between us that we protect each other. So the Nigerian official is not going to bother to extradite or to allow for the processes. So there's there's a lack of accountability, a serious lack of accountability. So people can just do there's no linkages, and we really need to focus on how do we create this database. If we are AU, if we are a united Africa, how are we united even on the data, so that we, when you're walking the streets of, if you talk about the Asians now who have these facial recognition codes and things, if then the cameras pick you up in Newtown, but you are in fact from Naba State somewhere, or in Nigeria somewhere, and I'm sorry to be using just that as an example, or you are from Kenya, or you're from anywhere else, we should be able to so that the data doesn't allow. And that's where we need to work towards, that there's in fact systems in place that allow for accountability, that ube novalo. Kenya, I can't go about, I'm not going to just disappear into the system because there's no accountability. So I think there's a lot that needs to be fixed in our IT, in our data collection of who we are, so that we can trace what it is that people are up to. The lack of accountability allows for a lot of this corruption to happen.
So, and this is not a problem only in South Africa. This is a problem everywhere. But before I even say what I'm going to say regarding your question, Ntsiki, I'm going to say, when I speak, anywhere I speak, like I said, when I introduced myself, I'm an African warrior woman. I don't speak of current Africa under its current political state. I don't speak of the current so-called African leaders. I don't speak of Africa under imperialism. I speak of an Africa that has liberated herself. So when I speak of Congo being the central place, I don't speak of Congo today as it is, the hateful people, the misinformed. No, I'm speaking of a liberated Africa. But now coming back to current Africa, the biggest criminals on our motherland is the foreigners, the Mzungu, the Chinese, the Arab. And we never seem to point our fingers at them. We're always pointing the fingers at us. I'm not dismissing that because of the conditions our people have been put through, they have become desperate people who result in crime. And if you sit and actually have empathy, you can understand why people, if you're dangling wealth in front of people who you have subjugated and denied wealth to, they will grab that wealth by force. So this is what we have going on. But when you truly think about who the criminal is that is stealing daily and killing daily on our motherland, it is not the one that looks like you and I. And we never seem to point fingers. And especially in South Africa, my brothers and sisters, you'll forgive me because I'm going to be a little harsh with you. You have white people in your government. I don't know what business you have the white man governing South Africa, and you turn around and complain about the Nigerian. That's a big problem. You're ready to embrace the white who stole your land, who still sits on your land, and you're not embracing your brothers and sisters. So before we even talk about our brothers and sisters who are a problem, let's talk about that elephant in the room, that white elephant. And actually, it's not an elephant because elephants are honorable animals. Let's stop that analogy. Let's talk about this thing we can't even define, that is life-eating, life-denying, life-consuming, that you have allowed in your homeland and smiling with and governing with, and you never, ever hold them accountable. And yet you want to start pointing fingers at your brothers and sisters. So until you do that, I'm not sitting with you to talk about our brothers and sisters who are a problem. Until you send the white man packing, I am not sitting with you to talk about the black people who are a problem. It's just as simple as that.
So my reaction to you about that, Ndugu, is you guys need to do the same in Kenya, by the way. You know, in Kenya, there are areas where you're not allowed. Just
100%. Mamkani.
100%.
Sorry, Mamkani.
So it's not a South African problem.
Phaphano to speak.
It's an African problem.
No, thank you so much, Ntsiki, and evening, ladies.
Hello,
I just realized that I find the discussion very, very hot, and I was just listening to Mam Tshabalala, and I tend to want to start by stating that I agree with her, especially in her response to Nduku, which was not a long response. I think the first thing that we need to accept is that the issue of what we call xenophobia, which is not even an African concept, by the way, is not unique to South Africa. I mean, if you go back to the 60s, Ghana kicked out Nigerians post their independence when their economy was booming. And then you look at the 80s where Nigeria with Ghana must go, where thousands of Ghanaians were kicked out of Nigeria and killed, by the way. If you look at the history and you go into details in terms of what happened in Nigeria, especially with the junta coming in and with post the oil boom in Nigeria, how the Nigerian government treated Ghanaians, who some of them fled to South Africa and went to the Eastern Cape as teachers and so on. So the issue of, we can even call it, perhaps we can say economic disagreements and so forth, but it's not unique to South Africa. So I do not agree that it's a question of South Africans not necessarily being able to be combative towards white people. Yes, there is that aspect, and there are many people. I mean, we look at Dr. Litchfield and many of her peers who have taken on the system and the establishment. So it's not quite true that we are comfortable with whiteness in our country. But the other reality is that the issue of migration governance that Ntshangase was speaking to, it's a continental problem. It's a continental issue. And let me just speak to specifically on this matter. Last year, there was supposed to be a conference on migration governance in Uganda, which hosts the biggest number of asylum seekers. Unfortunately, the conference could not seat. However, the reality is that African countries individually do not want to integrate. I mean, if you take SADC as an example, just take SADC, or you take the few countries which are part of the South African Customs Union, they do not even have a proper free trade agreement. Then you go to ECOWAS and so forth. So you have challenges which are individualistic at the same time, where politicians are exploiting the challenges that each country, each African member country state is dealing with. So I would want us to look at the realities, first from a country to country perspective, but also from a continental perspective. Yes, South Africans can be very antagonistic when it comes, especially when it comes to Nigerians. And, before, because I do not want to speak long on this issue. I mean, some of us have extended a hand to the Nigerian government to say that you really need to profile your country. You really need to rebrand Nigeria, because the concerns about Nigeria, correctly or incorrectly, specifically, they are not a South African problem. They are a global problem, but also they are a Nigerian problem, because there's tribalism in Nigeria. There's issues of clans. There's issues of different religions, Muslims who do not want Christians. So there are many issues if you take Nigeria, for example. But I think for me, what is critical is, how do we start looking at the issue of integration in the continent? Because I can tell you this: if Nigerians who are in the country and who are doing well, who are academics, who are business people, who are professionals, if we start profiling them, if they start coming out of their cocoons, if we see Zambians, Malawans, and many other Africans who are on the continent, who are in our country, and we see what they are doing differently, I think there could be a different perception to how we see fellow Africans. But indeed, because we do not control the means of production, the first people that we will go after, it's those who are weaker than us. We'll always go after spaza shops. I mean, if you listen to the radio today, the only topical issue is spaza shops. We are not necessarily talking about the economy. But someone needs to lead this conversation. Someone needs to set an agenda. In the absence of a group of people or organizations setting an agenda, I don't think we are going to go anywhere. And as I said, politicians, they are, it's for them, like if you take Gayton and others, for them it becomes, a populist issue. But at the same time, you also have business people who want cheap labor. So it's multifaceted. You might find that people would not want to deal with the issues of the border and would not want to deal with issues of migration because it helps them, because labor also in South Africa is quite expensive in comparison to the continent. So for now, I just want to stop here, and I'll continue because I had Mam Tshabalala talking about the visa issue. So as we go along, I'll be able to also speak as the other sisters contribute. Thank you so much, Ntsiki.
Ntsiki, I stopped because I wanted my sister Phaphane to continue. The issue of white people, of non-Africans, Arabs, Indians, whoever, who really are not African, it's not a South African issue, by the way. In Kenya, I was shocked to realize there are areas where I was told there are restaurants, they will not allow you in because you're an African. I said, not in Kenya. I go to Nairobi often. They said, okay, have you heard about foreign military bases? I said, yeah, well, I was a guerrilla before, then I'm a retired admiral. That's a topical question to me. They said, nah, we are talking to the right person. Where you find the military base in Kenya, the foreign military base, you then have what you call rangers. So it's a system we use in the guerrilla warfare, Mkondweni, for the South Africans who are listening, where you have a secular defense. So in that military base, firstly, they took the prime land. And then they have this secular defense of rangers. Rangers are white people who are hunters. And I was told, don't be deceived. They don't only hunt animals, they hunt human beings sometimes. So I just want to say, let's not have cheap nationalism. I think that's what I wanted to point out. I said this to Kenyans often. When they make an example of whites living in a country, they choose South Africa. I think we have become the doormat of Africa. They wipe their mud on us. But it's fine. We are making us to be proper because then we clean ourselves. But the same problems exist in your countries, by the way. That's why I don't like to single out countries. The only reason I singled out Ethiopia is because it's housing the AU. It's a headquarters of the AU. I would not have singled them out. If you look at East Africa, I mean, the Asians are in charge of those economies, truly. It's not Africans. So I think it leads us to one nice word that we normally use in South Africa called decolonization. We have not decolonized Africans. And because we haven't decolonized, we sit with the problems where somebody said it here. I think Phaphane, but I think you said it, Ntsiki, and Nduku and Khethi. We don't own the means of production in this continent. And because we don't, it means somebody else owns it. In South Africa, that's why we've coined the term white monopoly capital. But I don't want to use it glibly also because we know the Chinese have come on board. I mean, African countries are getting indebted to China now. So in essence, Ntsiki, we have not decolonized. And because we have not decolonized, we sit with the problems we sit with. But also, we can't decolonize if we don't want to be who we are, guys. If you are first a Muslim before you're African, you're first a Christian before you're African, how are you going to form the unity and be Africans? Indians can unite because whether you live there and we are not a Hindu or you are in another religion, they are Hindu first. That's why even the salute in the defense force says Jai Hindi. They've gone through that cultural revolution. In Europe, it's about white supremacy. Why do you think they are shutting their borders and they don't want the Africans who are migrating there? They are united by white supremacy. So what unites us Africans? Africa Day is only a holiday to 5 countries. If it's even 5, I didn't count well, of 54 countries. But Ramadan is a holiday, Easter is a holiday, Christmas is a holiday. So who are we? Who are we? You know, we are lambasted, South Africans, for all negative things, but we are never highlighted for a positive thing. In South Africa, at least African spirituality is alive, guys. It's alive, and we have young people, we have Gen Zs looking to find who they were before they were made into what they are. So for me, honestly, until we all embrace African spirituality and we all embrace who we truly are, this unity is so far-fetched. These visas will continue, which is where the topic started. These visas will continue. Phaphane, I was saying, Africans need to pay $50 to enter Ethiopia, but Ethiopia is the seat of the AU. How much have they made out of housing that headquarters? Is it about money for them, or are they really Pan-African? I also said Addis Ababa itself was founded by Empress Taitu Batul. There is no statue of her at the AU precinct. In fact, there's no photo of any woman on those walls. It's just men. Then we wonder why patriarchy is reigning so much in this continent. So I think I'll leave it there and allow other people to come in.
Okay. What is okay? Oh, okay.
Yes, no, please go, please. I'm still trying to infuriatingly sorting out the thoughts in my head. So please do go ahead.
I think maybe just quickly for 2 minutes before they go, Nsigi, I had asked you yesterday to please get a map if you did get it. But for the listeners, if Nsigi didn't get the map, just go on Google and say foreign military bases in Africa. You're going to get a shock of your life. Africa has been cut into two. We can't fight anybody militarily right now because they are in here. These bases stretch from west on the east on the Horn all the way to the west. And in Southern Africa, only Botswana, we should call them out. But I like what the new president said. He promised he'll shut it down. We need to hold him accountable. Because these foreign military bases are a problem. It means there's nothing we can do in secret, Papa. They listen in and they monitor us, not from America, but from within ourselves. I think, yeah, let me give it over.
No, I just wanted to check with you and with the fellow panelists. What is important? Because, for example, I do not know the concept of African spirituality. What I know is humanity and Botu. I've heard many people talking about traditional healing, which I might not necessarily lean towards or even understand. But for me, there are succinct points, for example, that are critical, that I believe that we must look at as Africans. And one of them is turning young people into a workforce. I mean, if you look at our population in Africa, it's bigger than China. I mean, we've got over 1.4 billion people, and the majority of the population in the continent is young people. Obviously, India has taken over. I mean, they are 1.4 plus a billion people, but they also have their own challenges. They have Hindus, they have Muslims, and they have their own, challenges internally. However, the country was also colonized. But what the country has managed to do, no different to China, is that at the moment, India, for example, is the 5th largest economy. It's projected to be the 3rd largest economy. And what the country has been looking at is what they call India First or Make in India. I think the industrialization program is not different to China. I can tell you now that everyone is going to come and colonize as Africa. And neocolonialism will not stop because African leaders allow this to happen. So until there's some sort of movement, I believe it could be African spirituality. I do not know at this moment if we can unite behind what is perceived as African spirituality. But I believe that we need to unite behind a common purpose, because the reality is that if you take a country like South Africa, the majority of people are Christians, including in the rest of the continent. But how do we move beyond conservatism? How do we take opportunity of the minerals in the continent and the reality that Namibia, for example, has got uranium, is the 3rd largest producing uranium country in the world. Botswana has got diamonds. Zimbabwe has got lithium. You've got Zambia with copper and many others. How do we integrate these countries? For me, I think the question is, how do we use, even be it African spirituality or any other language, how do we change our language so that it becomes economy? Because when we start talking about the economy, no country, no China is going to come to Africa and exploit us. But I think we've not had that conversation. Yes, the conversation of whom we are, I think it's very critical, but we must accept that we have been colonized. It's going to take years. But for those who have moved a bit forward, how do we ensure that first and foremost, we get access to capital? We own the means of production. So for me, I think these are also conversations which are quite important, so that we move from this puzzle shop conversation, which is a microeconomic type of conversation, to a macro conversation where we start talking about the means of production. I think for me, that is very critical, because I know Dr. Litchfield is, she talks about our hair, and I agree with her. And then others will talk about many other things. But then at some point, I believe that we must reach some type of consensus. And that consensus must be, how do we make Africa great again? How do we, as fellow countries, come together to ensure that we are able to trade together? And then we hold most of these politicians accountable. Thank you.
So, my sister, is it Phaphano? How do we say it?
Phaphano.
You forgive me. It's not an attack on you, please, because I have gotten in trouble on other stages when I say this and people take it personal. We unfortunately have been so capitalized as far as capitalism, right? We have been so mentally capitalized, and we don't even realize that when we speak, we are defending capitalism. And when I hear someone talking about solutions for Africa and they start with, let's focus on the economy first, that's a very capitalist way of approaching things. And it's not your fault, because it's the schooling you've been through. It's the
No, it's a wrong assumption,
right?
No, that's a very wrong assumption.
Capital, no, it's not. It's not. Hold on, please. I told you not to take it personally.
Capital is the means of. No. You can't assume that is the type of education. I want you to correct that, because you don't know the type of.
I will not correct it.
Okay, no, continue. But that's a wrong assumption, I can tell you.
It isn't. But thank you. If you can mute, please.
Continue. All right.
This is the education that is all over our motherland. It is a miseducation. It's not only all over our motherland, it is everywhere our people are. Even in the United States, they are being miseducated. We have nowhere, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Phaphano, in South Africa, where they're teaching from an African perspective. In Kenya, there's only one school, and even that school still has some westernization in it. So we have been brought up in a capitalist system, and we defend it, as you can see clearly from my sister, before we sit back and ask ourselves, what am I saying? You cannot build an economy if you do not free yourself politically. You cannot. And I was going to share something as Mama Kanyisile was talking about religion. Nsiki, if you allow me, please. Let me see.
I think it takes long to get to her, so maybe just go ahead.
So once Nsiki, you see it, just let me know, because you have to allow it on the, because it's sitting there, you have to allow it on the stage, and I'll go ahead and go to the picture. Yes, there we go. So can you all see that? A friend of mine sent me this the other day. And the first child is an Asian child saying, my God looks like me. And you can see their God there. The second one is, I'm going to say Indian, just to be safe. I'm not generalizing. My God looks like me, and you can see their God there. The white child says, my God looks like me, and you can see their child there. And so the question is, why does our child's God look like the white child's God, right? As you can see, and our child is confused. And this is a huge problem. Let me stop presenting. First of all, let's start by saying, I am with Mama Kanyisile. Let's take a whip and whip every one of our brothers and sisters. Grace has become a problem. Grace is the reason why we are still enslaved, because we give grace when grace is not required. We need to be harsh with each other. We need to awaken each other with slaps, because we are too comfortable. We need to make sure our brothers and sisters are so uncomfortable that they must awaken. So I am not here to accommodate Christianity or Islam. They are harmful to us, and I'm going to point them out as such, because it is clear they are harmful to us. Why is my black child looking at a white God, yet they're being told that they were created in the image of God? What is it about us? And we call ourselves educated. That simple logic, we can't step back and ask, why? And if you as a black child are looking at a white God, how does that affect you and your community in many other aspects? And so this thing we're talking about borders, This thing we're talking about, xenophobia, is a self-hate that we have. It truly is. That's what is going on. We have believed the lie that we are inferior. We have believed the lie that we are the weakest. We have believed the lie, unfortunately. And like I said, and Mama Kanyisli is very much right, it is not just South Africa. We have White Highlands. For heaven's sake, I don't understand why Kenya still has a place that is called the White Highlands. And you're right, Mama Kanyisli, in Nanyuki is a British base. And you're right, they hunt human beings as well. There's several cases of our people in Nanyuki being killed. Several cases of them raping the women there, these white people. Several cases of them having children with women there. And when we come to indict them with these criminal offenses, their government introduces a new policy that is going to make them immune to all these offenses. So I agree. There are so many things we need to sort out on our motherland that are a problem. And one of them is removing those military bases. But we must sit down and have a conversation where we're talking about things without taking it personal, because they're going to hurt. When I was introduced to decolonizing my mind, the whole time I felt like the professor who was speaking was attacking me. And I could have taken it personal. But I knew we needed to fix things, and we have to open our eyes and our ears and not take it personal so that we can get to the other side. I always give the analogy of the animals moving from Tanzania to Kenya through the Mara River and back from Kenya to Tanzania. The Mara River is full of crocodiles, but those animals always cross every year, despite the fact that there's no guarantee who's going to be eaten by the crocodile. But you must the other side to survive. And they cross every year. So we who call ourselves intelligent people, why are we not willing to cross the Mara River, the analogy, the symbolic Mara River, to get to liberation? Why are we so caught up in our feelings that mean nothing, literally? My sister, when I say capitalism and all that, that doesn't change who you are. It really does not take away from who you are when you think about it. So you shouldn't be offended. We all, Mama Kanyisile, Nsiki, myself, our sister, you, have gone through a miseducation that is not ours. And we must all clean our minds and not take it personal and find a place. And I agree with Mama Kanyisile, African spirituality is the only thing that is going to liberate us. So that's my 2 cents.
You know, what I love. In Zulu, there's a saying, bathi sishunqiselwe udosi lwempisi. And what it means is when thieves come into the night, into your house to come and rob you, in order to make sure that you don't wake up, they will burn the tail of impisi, would be a jackal, is it?
Is it a jackal or a hyena? I'm not sure. One of
them. Yes.
Probably hyena because it's fisi in Kiswahili, so the similarity there. Yeah.
Aha. Okay. Now they burn this to put you in a deep sleep. Yeah. So much so that even as you wake up, there's that point where your limbs, you're paralyzed, and I feel that this is where we are. I feel that like there's an awareness now, but we are overwhelmed by, seem to not be able to actually make effective action that says, that it brings about the change that chases them away, and they are in a rush to siphon as much as possible, and before this if whatever this voodoo is wears off. Now the question is, what is the antidote for udosi? Because there's definitely a need for an awakening. The integration in the continent. I spent a year in Tanzania, in Dar es Salaam, many years ago, and one thing that I was taught about how Kiswahili became the language of the nation, where Julius Nyerere Mwalimu had inherited 500 tribes, 500 clans, excuse my choice of words here, but there were 500 languages, right? How do you unite a people? And I'm not quite sure how this spilled over into how it was dealt with in Kenya in particular. I was in Tanzania hearing the Tanzanian version. they transcribed all the education for the university. Higher learning was put into Kiswahili, and those who were finishing grade 12 were given scholarships to go and study at a university, but the rule was you don't study in your province. So you had to be deployed into a different part of the country, and you were learning this language, which forced the people to come together. And then it was, of course, then at the same time, basic education was also being taught in Swahili. But this ensured in the later years, and now we don't know how it started and how rough it must have been in the beginning. But in the years to come, in decades to come, we see a Tanzania that is Swahili. There would be, I imagine there's people, of course, the local languages still do exist, but that unified them, right? Now, I think there was a missed opportunity for South Africa, being labeled as illegitimate as this, I feel, is, as the last one to be liberated. Hence, we moved from the OAU to the AU, which feels very illegitimate when we look at the stats and what we understand of how unliberated, in fact, we are. But I think there was a failed opportunity, a missed opportunity here, in order to combat things that have become xenophobic today, would have been send them to the continent and open up the borders for university students to go and study in the different parts of the continent to understand, and we would have avoided a lot of this misunderstanding, and there would have been a greater appreciation of who we are as a people, and how far we've come thus far. Even as we want to explore the channels to launch means of production, there's so much red tape. We are smart, we understand, we are intelligent, we are learned, we've got economists in our midst. We understand what it is that we need as structures that bring back manufacturing into the continent. Why are we not having our own cloth? Why are our textile can go so far into natural fibers? We need to reawaken Indwange Ndala, the original cloth. But there's so much red tape that we are just blocked, even as artists, when we write music that speaks to liberate the people, it's shunned. If it's not about love songs, if it's not about sigalekeke, your music is having a problem. Your poetry doesn't get, because when people engage it, it's healing to them, to the audience. But the gatekeepers don't feel that it doesn't serve the agenda, which the agenda says, stay in the sleep. We are growing. They're still siphoning as much as possible. My last point, please. Africa is treated like a giant supermarket, and people, in fact, they are looting in this giant supermarket. But as a Pick and Pay, as a Checkers, as a Spaza shop, as every now and then, you need to close the shop and do an inventory check of what it is that you have that belongs to you. Why can we not be talking about a 90-day shutdown? Yes, I'm imagining the upheaval, but a 90-day shutdown continentally. But we are obviously in trouble because, as we're saying, the countries are not talking to each other. So it's hard to coordinate such a thing. But ideally, we definitely need a shutdown that says, hold on, we need to take stock of where we are right now, what it is that does belong to us, what is the value of that, and then we need to reprice it accordingly. But yeah, there's too much control. There's the problem. But ideally, that's where we need it to be focusing towards. Thank you.
So my reaction to my sister Phaphano, because we have had two reactions from my sister Nduku and Khethi, is that while the economy is important, we have been sold a scam, by the way. People don't develop because they're economically okay. They develop because they've gone through a cultural revolution, which then makes them to be economically viable. And the examples are in history. When the Roman Empire fell in 476 CE, which is where we are, Common Era, Christians say Anno Domini after Christ. So it's 2023. You can count back and say 2023 minus 476. That's how long ago the Roman Empire fell. When it fell, the only institution that emerged there was the Roman Catholic Church. And it started abusing people. But Europe was in the dark ages from 476 until around 1300. So you can count, I think it's about 9 centuries. But how did Europe get itself out of that mess? Europe was dirty. I mean, what you see Somali is today, no central governance, people killing each other, people paying for protection. They even had, it was so dirty, they even had what they call the bubonic plague that wiped out 40% of Europe. It was bad. How did they pull themselves out? Golden Word in French called the Renaissance, which is nothing but a cultural reawakening. So Europe had a cultural revolution. They emerged there with one concept, white supremacy. And they knew this is what unites us, and this is what we're going to transport into the world. That's Western Europe. America, Civil War, they had a cultural revolution. What did they emerge as when they came out there? They are the model of democracy for the whole world. And if you don't agree with us, we shall invade you and bomb you and kill you. That's what America is selling. India, that somebody made an example of here. Oh, it was you actually, my sister. They've gone through a cultural revolution. Everything in India is first Hindu, then it shall be anything else. And you know what? We are scandalous because they are the longest colonized by the British. So the British did take Christianity there, by the way. But as soon as the British left, they kicked Christianity out. I'm not saying there are no Christians, but it is not the governing social theory. It is Hinduism that's governing. People have complained. They've complained about Modi. Whites have thrown their toys in the air. They have described him as this West bastard because they know if that cultural revolution succeeds, a nation that emerges on the other side, the analogy that Nduku gave, is a nation that will stand up against them, and India has done it. India is a nuclear state. The Marines will never invade India. They can talk from the sidelines. And you guys do me a favor, watch a movie called Phaphano, P-A-R-M-A-N-U. Phaphano, the story of Pokhram, because it talks about how India developed its nuclear weapons. I've never seen people so committed to who they are. The cultural revolution worked. Look at Malaysia. Cultural revolution. Where's Malaysia today? The examples are manifold. China's gone through a cultural revolution during Mao Zedong's time. Look at where China is. When the term Third World was birthed, Africa and China were in the same place. You can't compare us today. China has left us behind. So you can't. It's not possible. Look at Russia, guys. Russia's gone through a cultural revolution. No country has defeated Russia ever. From Napoleon Bonaparte to Hitler in the Second World War to what Americans are doing now. They thought by now they would have stabbed Russia to a standstill. Cultural revolution. Russians know who they first are before they are anything else. So the issue then of African spirituality for me comes in there. Unless Africa goes through a cultural revolution, guys, we are going nowhere. Because we sit here, as I say again, first as Christians, first as Muslims. You know the way we are so confused, my sister Peppan. You have a nation in East Africa that I'm not going to mention. Because the Chinese are so big in that nation, they are now even converting to, what is it called? Confucian, the Chinese one, Confucianism. So now we first converted and became Muslims because Islam came first here in 639. Then Christianity, we first were Christians. Then Islam comes in 639. You have communities fighting each other in Nigeria. It's still playing out. Christians versus Muslims. Now we are adding Confucianists. Now we are going to add Hindus. If India comes as a superpower here, you are going to see people converting to Hinduism. I'm just like, what is wrong with my people? But I know what is wrong with my people because we were told focus on the economy, which we don't, the means of production we don't even own. But we shall never own them until we go through a cultural revolution. Emerge on the other side and say, what were we before we were made into the dust that we are? Remember, all these nations, I've heard someone talk about South Africa, it's not just South Africa. All these nations are artificial nations. All these nations were birthed as trading companies, not even as nations. That's why we continue to be trading companies. We all have got a number. Please check it on Google. We all have trading numbers as these countries. So as long as we hold on to this identity of these countries, which were birthed through slavery and colonization, and we don't want to go through a cultural revolution that restores who we were. For instance, we are talking the economy. In pre-colonial Africa, it is women who drove the economy. But if the AU does not have a single picture of a woman on the wall, including even the picture of Empress Taitu Betul, who founded and named Addis Ababa, because we haven't gone through a cultural revolution, we keep pushing men to run the economy. The economy was African run in African spirituality. We were the agriculturalists. Because we controlled the markets. Because we controlled the seeds. They are now taking away our original seeds and giving us GMO. It is the women who must stand and fight, who must stop calling men to do it. The seed is our baby. We are the ones who should be opening seed banks and storing our original seed. But you see, if you haven't gone through a cultural revolution, you can't approach development like that. Japan's gone through a cultural revolution. Look at where they are. What is in Japan really? It's a small island, but look at where they are. So I think for me, that's what Nduku was saying. And I saw a question of someone who was saying, Nduku must explain what she means. That's what I'm explaining. Quickly, my sister, Ketubong, Tanzania troubles me greatly as an Afrocentrist, not as a Pan-Africanist, because the two are not the same. It's a podcast for another day. I've gone past through being a Pan-Africanist. I'm an Afrocentrist now. Tanzania bothers me. See, in Europe, nobody has taken anybody else's language away. They still don't fight. How do they do it in the EU? How do they do it? Why must Pan-Africanism kill a heritage that is millions of years old? Do you know Africans are the first race on earth? Millions of years old. In Tanzania, the local languages are unknown. They are dying. When I speak to Tanzanians and I say, what's your mother's, I don't call them tribes or ethnicities. Those are nations. What's your mother's nation group? They say, oh, I must first go and find out. They don't know. So while that was a miracle that Swahili'd everybody, I argue, I choose the Kenyan model. Swahili me, but let me keep my Kamberness. Let me keep my Kikuyu-ness. Because it is unity in diversity. Because it is in Kamberness that I find myself and my spirituality that unites with the Kikuyu one, because African spirituality in the end unites. So if you kill that, what have you left?
Okay.
So
may I come in?
A glaring example, but I think we leave it back to Ntigi and see maybe she has follow-up questions to all the things we all three of us said.
Can I come in, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to start by quoting Amilcar Cabral when he says, always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in anyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children. Now, yes. I really do not have a problem with what Nduku was saying. But tonight, as we engage, there is someone, there is a child, there is a family, there are millions of Africans who are going to bed hungry. That is a reality. Now, I also want to speak to the issue of the means of production or capitalism. I'm not here to defend capitalism. It was a concept which was conceptualized somewhere in Europe. But when you look at it, it primarily speaks about ownership of the means of production, which includes land. Now, as we are having this conversation in South Africa, what we call Black people, they do not even have a relationship with the land. Many Black theologians would say that there's, the womb, there's a disjuncture between the womb and the land. These are realities. Land is the economy. Language is a currency. So I'm hoping that, when we engage on these issues, because spirituality is one of the aspects that makes politics and economy. The economy also includes politics. You cannot speak of politics and you don't include the economy, as much as you cannot speak of the economy without including politics. And I also want to speak to some of the countries that have been mentioned. I mean, I want to start with Japan as an example, because before China modernized and reformed, They called it opening up, and they called it reformed and opening up. Japan, actually, if we recall, Japan was bombed. There were 2 bombs which were thrown at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this was done by the Russians, by the Americans, and the British. But what did Japan do?
No. It was done by Americans. No, it was done by Americans. I don't disagree. That was Americans.
Please. No. Please look at what is called the Yalta Conference. The Yalta Conference is where Stalin, it's where Winston Churchill and the American president met, and they bombed Japan. So this one, it's a fact. You can look at the Yalta Conference. You can just
the A bomb was manufactured in America. The Russian army was engaged in the Eastern Front in the Second World War. While the bomb was being thrown, the Red Army was actually marching towards Berlin. It was not there. Remember, they will meet like that because in the Second World War, you had France, you had America, you had Russia fighting as the Allied forces, fighting Nazism. But they gave themselves a sphere of influence. It's the American army that fought in Manchuria.
No, Dr. Tshabalala, please. No, just look at the Yalta Conference and the agreement between these 3 countries in particular. But what I'm trying to drive at is that after Japan was bombed, what did they do in terms of their economy? They went back to the very US and they had an economic agreement. That's why Japan, in relation to Asia, it became the biggest economy. Now, let me also go back, let me also engage on China. And you spoke of the Cultural Revolution. During Chairman Mao's tenure, millions of Chinese were murdered during the Cultural Revolution in China. And what happened was that the founder, or the person who's called the founder of modern China, who is Deng Xiaoping, he came up with a different concept when he took over. In fact, to the extent that he was even imprisoned by Chairman Mao. He went to the very Japan. And then after that, he went to the US and he came up with this concept of opening up and reform. What did it mean? Opening up China to the world, where China would industrialize, manufacture, working with the Americans, working with Ronald Reagan, including Singapore, including many of these countries. Now, in the context of, in fact, that also includes India, because if you look at India now, they have, if you look at the relationships, they have a greater relationship with the US and G7 countries, also because of the dynamics in the Indo-Pacific region. But I'm saying that, and I agree, we might engage on issues of spirituality, but spirituality will not put food on the table. We need to have a multifaceted engagement where we're able to say, this is what needs to happen. As I said, how do we make Africa great again? We know that so-called Greek scholars, all the so-called great Greek scholars, they studied here in Africa. Now, how do we make Africa great again in terms of science, in terms of mathematics, in terms of engineers? Because you cannot take this away from Africa. You cannot tell me that we must only speak of spirituality when the greatest engineers studied here in Africa. Euclid, Socrates, Plato, and so on, they studied here in Africa. The first person who's considered to be the father of medicine started here in Africa. And you will then tell me that I must only focus on spirituality. For me, I don't think it's going to take us anywhere. We need to look at Africa as this big holistic continent. Those who can conscientize our people on spirituality, let them do so, but our people need to eat. Because I can tell you now, a person with an empty stomach will not listen. In fact, they are the first people who are going to sell out. So I'm just saying that teach people how to make their own food. Teach our people how to make, to grow their own food. Teach our people how to educate themselves. So I'm just saying that, yes, I respect the fact that we need our own religion. For me, it's even a non-factor to me, to be honest. Yes, we can discuss that. But for me,
it's actually not religion. It's not religion. There's a fundamental difference between religion and spirituality.
Oh, yes.
And all the things we are mentioning, by the way, my sister Papa, are spirituality. because in Africa, see, religion says matter versus spirit. So they say science versus belief. Not in African spirituality. We say science and spirituality come together. So in spirituality, in African spirituality, the economy is central, morality and ethics is central, governance is central, all the things we are talking about, the land is central, means of product. So I think you need to expand your definition of spirituality. Is not going to Isangoma. That's not African spirituality. That's not even a fraction of what
Dr.
African
Tshabalala, remember the other panelist had said that I cannot speak of the economy because her assumption was that when I spoke of the economy, I was speaking to capitalism. The means of production is not necessarily capitalism. Land is not capitalism, you know. So that's what I'm speaking to. But lastly, because I'm going to Botswana, sorry, I need to go. I need to go to Botswana now. I'm just requesting that can I just be excused? I'm hoping that next time we'll take this conversation further because I'm unfortunately pressed on time. But thank you so much, Nduka and all the panelists and Siki.
Yes, my sister. Yes. Good to be with you here.
Yes,
and as we
good to be with you.
Yes, as we
I'm
continue.
supposed to go to Botswana too, Papa. I don't know because I have another pending trip on Saturday, which is crucial. So I'm trying to make a decision. But I was in Botswana. I campaigned with opposition. So
oh, yes. No.
So,
yes.
Go on.
But yeah, I was saying if I end up not going, please enjoy for me too.
No, we'll do our best. But as I'm saying, I'm hoping that we'll have these conversations as we go forward. And I'm excited to see matriarchs and women having this discussion. Ntiki, thank you so much. We live in a country where men, are bombarding us with ideas. So I'm truly appreciative. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much.
Ntiki,
we're gonna wrap up soon, anyways. Yes, thank you. Yeah, you can continue, Nduku.
Yes, as Phaphano was speaking, and I agree with Mama Kanyisile 100% that African spirituality is more holistic than we think it is. This description of undermining African spirituality and saying it's a non-factor comes from us being lied to. Again, it's that colonial mentality. And I don't know what diagnosis or what way of explaining this is going to be palatable so that we don't have people immediately shutting their ears and going on defense mode instead of hearing what is being said. So quickly, as we were talking, I went to chat GPT and I'm being very transparent about where I was. And in my, as I've said severally on Kumbukeni, when I do chat GPT, what are they called? Prompts. I always have to say, so this one I said, generate a summary description of African spirituality that is African-based, non-biased, anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, anti-white supremacist. So I say that so that it doesn't give me something that is leaning towards whiteness. And this is the results it gave me. African spirituality is a rich, holistic system rooted in the connection to nature, community, and ancestry, transcending any one religion and encompassing diverse spiritual beliefs and practices across the continent. It honors the interconnectedness of all living things, viewing the earth as sacred and humanity as an integral part of a balanced ecosystem. This spirituality is inherently communal, emphasizing respect, empathy, and harmony with others, guided by the principle of Ubuntu, which centers the collective well-being of the community. Central to African spirituality is the reverence for ancestors, who are not seen only as family members and who have passed, but also as vital spiritual guides. Ancestors are respected and consulted for wisdom, guidance, and protection, connecting individuals to their lineage, culture, and identity. African spirituality also includes an understanding that everything possesses a spiritual essence, affirming the unity between the physical and spiritual worlds. This spiritual system is distinctly anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, and anti-white supremacist, as it values African self-determination, heritage, and cultural autonomy. It has long resisted colonial attempts to undermine African identities and replace native beliefs with foreign religions and ideologies. African spirituality offers an alternative to the individualism and materialism often imposed by colonial and imperialist powers, instead advocating for a balanced, reciprocal relationship with the natural world and a commitment to social justice and equality. Ultimately, African spirituality empowers Africans to reclaim their cultural narratives, resist oppression, and honor their ancestral legacy. It provides a foundation for liberation, unity, and resilience, aligning with the historical and ongoing efforts to achieve African sovereignty and self-actualization. So, given that description, why would you as an African not think that African spirituality will make sure you're fed? Why would you as an African not think that African spirituality will make sure that your health is well? Why would you as an African not think that African spirituality will make sure that you're clothed and you're cared for? What is it in our mind that when we hear African spirituality, we're seeing it as inferior? We don't see economics in it, right?
Or science. Or science.
Or science. And nature is science. How we interact with nature, the medicine that keeps us from getting sick, the medicine that keeps us healthy. So we have, and I think Nsiki, as our sister Phaphano asks for a follow-up conversation, it needs to be African spirituality. That should be the conversation. Because we, again, several times Makanyisile has said this is where the problem is, that we are detached from African spirituality. And it's about time we explain that this is not just about church. This is not just about wearing white clothes and going to a building.
It's not just about going to a sangoma. Because that's what people have made it. Right? That's why Nsiki is smiling.
Thank you. And African spirituality, by the way, is also battle, because you have to defend that community. African spirituality is holistic. It is everything that keeps us going and maintains the well-being of the community. So I say my piece.
And maybe to bring it back to the discussion before Khethi Bonga comes in, if we had all embraced African spirituality and who we were before we were made into who we are, because even the name Africa we were given, I don't think we would have imposed visas on one another as we are doing right now. I don't think that we would have put the capital of the AU in a country that does not know if it is Muslim or Christian, that has no respect for other Africans, truly. And I'm not talking about an average Ethiopian here. They must not get angry. I'm talking about the government, because it is the government in power that knows exactly what it is doing. It is the government in power that is reaping profits out of that AU HQ instead of furthering the ideas and the agenda of our unity. It is the government in power that is agreeing with the all-male photos on the wall of that African Union. It is the government in power that does not even care that it is sitting on what we call in African spirituality, abaphansi bendawo. So abanye abantu bathi idlozile ndawo, mina ngithi abaphansi bendawo. Every soil you walk on in Africa has got its original ancestors who might have been forcibly removed, who might have moved from there or whatever. The AU sits on the original ancestors, being one of them, Empress Taitu Betulu, who founded and named that city. The name they call every day Addis is what she named it, but she's nowhere near the wall of that headquarters. So really, you think if we all were in African spirituality, we would not have seen all of this as problematic. Because African spirituality is about Ubuntu, it's about interconnectedness. It's about connectedness to the soil, as you were saying. They would have known they are standing on a soil that Empress Taitu Betul, blessed and named.
Mama Kanyisile, not only did she name, as you spoke of Empress Taitu literally liberated Ethiopia from colonization. She, when they were faced by the Italians deceived them. When they came to both she and Emperor Menelik, and they brought the two letters, right? One in Italian and one in Amharic. And they said, the agreement is similar, sign it. And she said, I don't trust these people, to her emperor. She said, I don't trust these people, my husband. I don't trust these people. And the emperor wanted to give grace, and he gave grace. But she said to him, listen, go ahead and do this deal. But when you do realize, and you will realize, that they are betraying us, they're deceiving us, I am going to be the first one to cut his testicles, because that was they used to cut their enemies' testicles and put them in jars. And he said, yes, my queen, my empress, I am going to let you be the one. And I am going to lead the war, she said to him. And he said, yes. And therefore, it came a time they found out they were deceived, and the copy of Italian copy was not equal to the Amharic copy. And she led the battle, and they won. She led the battle, and they won. So literally, Ethiopia's liberation and the fact that they've never been colonized is thanks to Empress Taitu. If nothing else, that should make it, like, she should be everywhere you go on that land.
We haven't heard you comment, my sister Khethi Ntshangase, for some time. Sorry, I think we need to give you space because I think Ntshiki wants to bring us to conclusion.
Right. Western powers are intimidated by women, by the power.
Sorry, I'm so sorry to be dictatorial. Ntshiki, please just read what's on the screen now, because I meant to say it after Phaphano talked, but I forgot. Just read the comment on the screen by one of the people listening quickly.
I hope it's this one, because remember there's a delay. This one from Quantum.
Okay, let me read it quickly. It says just a correction It says just a correction to Pabalo. Japan and China first closed off while experiencing a cultural revolution. When they opened to the world, they had redefined and self-determined who they are. So before I give it to my sister, just a minute quickly, there are concepts which we need to unpack next time. Acculturation, enculturation, and absorption. If you have not assimilated your own culture, you cannot enculturate, which means you cannot interact with other cultures. It will not be interaction, it will be absorption, because you don't know who you are. So I like this comment. They did that because they had acculturized, they knew who they were before they could enculturate with others. In Africa, we cannot do that. Any culture that we meet absorbs us because we haven't defined who we are. Thank you, my sister. Sorry, I cut in. Please, I'm bringing it back to you. Sorry.
No, not at all. I mean, this comment speaks to what I was requesting, which sounds, the fear in all of us says, how dare you? How are you going to close off? What do you mean? But you know, it has been done in history, and it's just even in a boxing match, right? So people meet then there's after 3 minutes, the bell rings, we go into our own corners and we meet with our teams, and it is those teams that the coaching comes back and there's notes about how you are doing in the field, in that little box, and then the bell goes and you go into battle again. But there's never been there was never in our liberation, we are going to actually, understanding that we invaded, we're going to give you your space so that you can collate, to gather yourself again as those people. No, it was a continuation.
Yes.
For my understanding of African spirituality has been, it's God of nature. God is a nature. We are so connected, and our languages, the importance of our language, it speaks about it. We see God in the beauty of the world, in what is in the nature's, in God's design is what is supreme, and that is, we see it through nature. And what I'm seeing is that even as the world is in crisis, the long term, the reality is that Africa is rising. And we are, yes, battling, because it is feeling rather untidy, but we've been messed up so much. So it's going to be, when we're doing renovations, it gets messy. So we are just we must just have patience with ourselves. But as long as we are able to push forward ultimately and not regress, this is what is important. It will be messy, we will disagree, we must meet each other somewhere, and these conversations and discussions are invaluable. Like it's necessary. A definition of our wealth is not about material things. Ours is, an African is rich, is truly rich when his people are healthy and her land is wealthy. Now, our land is wealthy, but we don't have access to it. Our people are not healthy because, and that's a constructive thing. We have been given bad food. Now they're stealing our seeds, and we are cheapened. So we are left to eat. We are stuck with the spaza shop issue that we are finding ourselves in, because that is the food that we have access to. But an African is truly rich when her people are healthy and her land is wealthy. So if we understand these philosophical fundamentals and let these be the driving force of what we are trying to attain, we definitely we would have a better path to getting where we're needing to get to. But there's lots of egos that we need to work through. But there's an awakening, please. Thank you.
So
Thank you,
I think, Ntsigi, if I can just come in for a minute and say, then therefore, because that's what I always say, having said all we said tonight, then therefore, where to from here? The first thing we need, and I see Sis Khethi Ntshangase also asked it, the first thing we need to do is to run a campaign to abolish all visas in Africa. We'll get to the borders. Let's just start with the visas. We need to abolish all visas for all AU members going into AU countries. It's the first thing we need to do. Secondly, we need to start interrogating what will it take to have a cultural revolution in this continent. Because truly, for as long as we sit, we are going nowhere. It is laughable. I had a captain in the Navy who truly used to just say to me, let's speak now openly as human beings. And I won't mention his name, White. He would tell me, look, if everything that happened to you guys, and I don't mean you as South Africans, I mean this whole continent, if the tables were reversed, you did these things to us, we won't even spit on your graves right now. Our saliva would be too precious for us to even spit on your graves. So I think side by side with scrapping visas, we need to start that journey. It started a little bit when Pan-Africanism moved from Pan-Africanism in the 80s to be Afrocentrist thinking. That whole cultural revolution, but the FBI cut it in the bud. People should look at a movie called, I think it's called something. You watched it, Nduku, help me with the name. Judas the Black Messiah, something like that. Yeah, yes. It's called Judas the Black Messiah. The FBI, to show how important the cultural revolution is, the FBI took it upon itself to nip it in the bud. That's the era where we had the Afros and we had Black is Beautiful, and we were beginning, the seeds were being laid, but it was aborted. So that's the second thing we need to interrogate, what will it take? Thirdly, we need to start defining Ntsigi, because we use it as a nice big term, decolonization. What exactly do we mean? Because if we start doing that, African spirituality will come in the steps that we need to do. So we need to have at least a 5-point step. What do we mean by decolonization? Because we all haven't decolonized. Fourth thing, we need a common African language, and Swahili is already that. Just we need to learn. We shouldn't adopt it as Tanzania did, as actually Nyerere imposed it on Tanzania. We need to do it the Kenyan way. Have Swahili as a uniting language, but also don't let our languages die. Because in the cultural revolution, we need those cultures to come together. Because if those cultures die, you will end up with Zulu people telling you that Zulu people are patriarchal. But when you know the history and the culture, it will point to Mkabayi, to Nandi, to Mkabayi's sister. It will point to all those things. But if you let it die, you will deal with Zulu people as they are today, who've converted to Christianity and as patriarchal, So I think for me, those would be the 4 things. I don't know how my sisters feel, because I think we need to end with action points.
Yes, we do need to wrap up. I think, can I just give the speakers maybe 2 minutes each just to wrap up today's conversation? Thank you so, so much. That was so insightful. Siyabulela.
I think for me, I emphasize the 4 things. We need to scrap all visas. We need a campaign. It's not going to happen. It's the men running this because we've only had 3 African women presidents, and I've even said how they came accidentally. So we, the women, need to take it upon ourselves to run a campaign to scrap visas. And Moya would really have put us on the map if we start this campaign online through Moya. But we also need to start lobbying these embassies and protesting at these embassies. Visa must go. We want a visa-free Africa. 2, we need to sit down as women and start saying, what does a cultural revolution look like in Africa? And tie that to decolonization. When we say decolonize, what are the 5 top things that needs to be done in that journey to decolonize? 4, what shall it take to force the 54 states to adopt Swahili? You do realize if we ask all grade 1s next year to do Swahili as an added, I'm not saying it should replace Zulu in South Africa, because we do our mother tongues until grade 12. It's not common in Africa, by the way. So I'm not saying Swahili must come and replace Zulu, Sotho, or whatever. It must be an added language. But if we do that in 12 years, we shall have produced the first breed of Africans who don't need interpretation to talk amongst themselves. Currently, I'm sure you all know, when we say what are the AU languages, they say French, English, Portuguese, and Arabic. Yes, officially, those are the AU languages. Swahili was added after a serious struggle. It has to be fought for. So for me, those were the 4 things. And I want to thank you, Ntshiki, for having uncomfortable conversations. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who tuned in.
The vision for this continent, for a people thriving, colorful nature, warm sentiments. Even as the world is in crisis, Africa rises, Africa rises with the determination to move beyond misconceptions, a rebirth of a land and people, viewing themselves as equal, emerging filled with purpose, together towering all adversities. We're thriving as a people, so kula wena, ngoba kukula mina. Khula nawe mntwana, nawe mvelo yami. I'm born on the 25th of May, 1980. 25th of May is Africa Day. 25th of May on a Sunday, when both my grandparents, paternal and maternal, decided, coming out of church of a Pentecost service, that my name would be called Moya. The theme for the OAU the day I was born was Open Skies for Africa. There's a mission, there's a drive, there's a need, there's a purpose. Can we just commit? And we are in motion. I give thanks.
That was beautiful, my sister. Thank you for that. That was a blessing. Thank you. Ntshiki, Mbongi Albotu, the organization that we started, the Imagine Al Kelbulan have come together, and we're inviting all Afrocentric, formerly known as Pan-African or Pan-African. And don't come to us if you are a CIA entity, because we know some Pan-Africans, that's what you are. But we are inviting other organizations to join us, and either in December or January, we're all going to sit down to talk about these issues and talk about what solutions we can implement. The goal of that conference is to implement. We're not just going to get together to talk. We're going to make sure we implement, we hold ourselves accountable, because we cannot wait for the puppet to liberate us. We cannot wait for the so-called leaders to liberate us. We have to do it ourselves. So we, the people, are going to reclaim our land. We, the people, are going to reclaim our way. We, the people, are going to defend it and sustain it. Peace. That is my fist that is not being seen, but it's there. Isile, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Tuko
Thank you,
pamoja.
ladies.
Tuko pamoja.
Thank you to everybody who joined the.
Tuko pamoja.
Thank you, guys. I see everybody so excited. Thank you so much for joining the live. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Please join the channel. It's only 20 Rand a month, and we're going to see you guys again next time. All right. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Nice one. Ciao.
Oh, snap. I'm trying to end the stream here. The network is so awful. End stream.